everybody. Welcome to the RS Confrontation week. We're going to be talking about artist confrontation as it happens in, as I talk about in this book a little bit. Sorry if I'm a little bit distracted. We are babysitting, and I will show you. Come here, baby. Come here. This is baby. So, yeah, the dogs and cat play, so sometimes it's a little bit distracting. So sorry if I look off during this a few times. They are just running around. It's a lot more distraction than I'm used to. Anyways, so artist confrontation, ethical art week, or ethical quandaries in arts, like controversies in arts. So in your Ways of Looking book by Ocean, I'm really trying on his name, guys. And so, okay, so this page. So on the first page, like at the front of the book, this is what Ocean starts off by talking about. Is a work by Thomas Hirschhorn. I'm showing you a different one because if you read your book, you don't need to talk about this anymore because you know, so I'm going to talk about other stuff. Also, I don't want to talk about the one in the book because it makes me want to vomit. But they also talk about it on the podcast, so you'll get that point across there. But it's not just like the photographic like video installation type work that Thomas Hirschhorn does. He also does like different installations and a lot of like kind of shock value art for sure. And he declared once, "I want to give a form which resists facts, which resists opinion, and which goes beyond actuality, which reaches beyond information, which is why I invented the motive eye, and its capacity to see everything red. The eye doesn't need to show, the eye just sees, and that's what counts." Red here, so this is talking about this, but it's also talking about, like, obviously in the one from this book, the red, the blood, from the videos of the people that were hurt in war, and like the casualty of like just like swiping through it to kind of signify how like normalized and numb I guess we have become to like seeing these images. So this one is called The Eye, or Das Auge. It's like German or something, Danish probably. So, like, what he's trying to say here is, so here we have a bunch of, like, dead seals, like, fur coats covered with red, or, like, these aren't actual, they're, like, fake ones, and models, protest flags, and postcards, from all over the world. So he's mostly, like, trying to, analyze media, journalism, and opinions and comments on how they oppose, like, the ideology of what we think. So I guess in a way, what he's doing here is kind of commenting on everybody's like ethics and morals, and how like, we always see that, oh, this is bad, but we're also like, everybody wants the furs, but then it's also like furs are a murder. So it's like kind of like the play between that. So Hirschhorn understands that we are simply like in life we're told too much. Like ultimately, we're like desensitized by these videos of these horrid acts. It's not just because of the news, but also just like all of the media that we consume in everyday life. I'm not someone that can like take like blood and gore and stuff like that, which is also why I want to show that. Like I tend to get a little bit nauseous. I didn't make it through the whole first episode of Game of Thrones because sorry, spoiler alert if you like haven't watched Game of Thrones. That's the first episode. I don't know what happens in the rest except for like the red wedding, which everybody knows. But yeah, that kind of stuff is like too bloody for me, but he kind of like plays on the idea that we're like seeing this all the time, not just like from these war-torn nations, but also like just in video games and life and media and movies, and we're coming desensitized to it. So sorry. The confrontation Hirschhorn demands is a form of witnessing. You and I don't need the artist to tell us 1,000 times that wearing fur is bad. We need to feel it incumbent on us to decide for ourselves. So, you know, it's like those documentaries. Like, there's a million documentaries about, like, how to become, like, reasons why you should become a vegan and stuff like that. You know, everybody knows reasons. You have to decide it for yourself. Witnessing requires us to shift our spectatorial position and enter the time of the image circulation and make a judgment about what we see there. The acts of being present and giving testimony sound deceptively simple, since any visit to an exhibition, no matter how casual, requires physical presence of the expenditure of some modicum of attention, a prerequisite for testimony. So it's just basically saying, like, regardless, you came there to see this exhibition, so you're, like, already thinking about it. Yeah, so you're gonna explore. So we're exploring these ideas, and basically he's just trying to make you think deeper about, like, what does it mean, like, that we all have all these ideas to us every day. So let's go on to the next part. Where did I put my clicker? All right. So the difference between ethics and morals, I figured, like, before we, like, really get into this, because they're essentially used interchangeably, and, like, to a certain extent they are the same thing, but they're also, like, different. And so here's what ethics and morals relate to right and wrong conduct. While sometimes are used interchangeably, they're different. Ethics refers to rules provided by an external source, i.e. codes of conduct and workplace principles of a religion, and morals refer to an individual's own principles regarding right and wrong. So ethics are, like, you know, code of ethics for UGA, like, if you get in trouble, you'll have to go see them. I mean, there's ethics for, like, everything. Like, plagiarism is an ethic thing, but within an institution, again, there's a bunch of religious ethical principles. Essentially, that's what, like, the Ten Commandments are. Morals are more of, like, this is what I feel like is right for me to do. Like, you know, like, I don't need a Bible to tell me that killing someone is wrong, because it is, you know, like, that's morally, like, my opinion. So, yeah, internal, I guess, feelings. So here's a little thing. So ethics are by social systems and are external. That's an easy thing to remember, because ethics, external, ethics are external. Morals are individual and internal. So if you think about it like me, except instead of an E, it's an MI. So individual, morals, individual. So, I mean, if you want to talk about that later in life, it will help you regardless of art. Yeah, so y'all can just kind of, you know, everybody has different opinions about this stuff. So y'all look through this. You know, ethics are more of a society thing, but people say that society has loose morals, but is it like that we have loose ethics? I don't really know. Because sometimes people care, sometimes people don't. You know, I don't have to give the example that I want to give, but, you know, sometimes people just don't really care, and it's very obvious. So, you know, you just have to pick through between what's bullshit and what's not. And, okay, whatever. Greek word, ethos, meaning character, ethics, ethos, so character, ethics. And then morals, most, Latin word, meaning customs. Morality transcends cultural norms. So, morality transcends the culture. So, yeah, like, killing people is bad, transcends the culture. That would be like, right now, we don't really care about, like, I mean, look at Cardi. Like, there's not as much censorship, you know, in the media or, like, with music and stuff, but, like, a long time ago there was, like, think about, like, they didn't even show Elvis's pelvis. So that's kind of things, like, That's changed over time. That's ethics. You know, it changed as like our culture changed. So that's easy to remember. Okay, I'm gonna go on. All right. So we're gonna start out by oh shit. So this is a work by Chris O'Feely, and it's called The Holy Virgin Mary, and the painting depicts a black Virgin Mary surrounded by female genitalia and buttocks cut out from pornography magazines. To say that this made people mad, like, I mean, obviously, but a lot of people that it made it mad, they were mad. People a lot of times, they don't get mad because they've seen it. They get mad because they hear these things. So if you only hear, you don't even see it, you don't know anything else, and you hear that someone made a, oh, and I forgot the best part. He painted it with elephant dung. That's why it says oh shit. So it's like literally made out of poop. But he actually kind of made it as like an African cultural like representation, because he used like a pigment from, because he was living in Africa at the time. He's an African American artist. No, he's not. He's a British African artist. A black British artist. I think he's British. So one of her breasts is an entire ball of elephant manure. And the painting calls attention to the racial stereotypes and the generational whiteness of biblical figures and Western representations. So, I mean, you know, Jesus was not white. Like, that's not, he lived in the Middle East. The people that live there are not, they're brown. So that's kind of what he's talking about, the whitewashing of biblical figures. However, not everyone has been particularly willing to critically delve into the meaning behind the painting. In 1999, the painting was exhibited at a Brooklyn museum in New York. Then Mayor Rudy Giuliani called the controversial art sick and disgusting. He also threatened to cut funding from the museum, asserting that the painting was offensive to religious audiences. Several months into the exhibition, a visitor smeared white paint on the painting, claiming the image was blasphemous. So, blasphemy. Who's to say? But yeah, so it made a lot of people mad. You can call it things whatever you want, but people were gonna get people. Here's one thing. Like, shit offends people. That's like, oh shit, does this offend you? People get really offended if you talk about religion, especially Christianity, I feel like, but that's because we live in America and it's like a largely Christian society, even though separation of church and state. But making commentary on religion is very controversial. It will piss people off. So, at first glance, this is a painting, not a painting, this is a photograph, and this is by Andrea Serrano, and so it was actually originally called Immersion, and what it is a little plastic like figurine from you know, like a gas station or something, like a crucifix figurine that he immersed into a cup of pee and then took a picture. Yeah, people were mad. So the Guardian report, like, so far in the, how many times, this has been like, okay, so it was first shown in 1987 and it was smashed like immediately. Oh, and another big problem with the work was that it was funded by an NEA grant, which is the National Endowment for the Arts. And then, like, there was, like, a bunch of hoopla there about, like, what is the government allowed to fund? And, like, like what does the funding of an artwork and the image and representation have to say about anything and stuff like that. So they smashed someone in smashed acrylic barrier with an ice pick in 1997 and in 2007. And another print of the photo was destroyed in Australia in 1997. Yeah. Basically, this is one of the most controversial works. It's all on there. I don't really feel like reading all that out for y'all. But this is in various places that it has been shown, because I mean, it's photographed. It can be printed again and again and again. As long as he has the negative. So yeah, this has been destroyed a lot, to say the very least. It's very controversial. Ultimately, like, what he's trying to kind of play on is like the ideal of like iconography and like, you know, the reproduction of it, and like how this like little thing that's like made in China, or like, you know, like a million like little things, and then they're sold all over the world, and then they ultimately like end up in the trash with your pee, and you know, it's about consumerism and like that kind of stuff too. But yeah, have an image of Jesus submerged in pee and call it piss Christ, and people are gonna be pissed. So yeah, look into that if y'all want. Controversial art. Alright, so does this make you uncomfortable? Controversial art that like confronts you might make you uncomfortable. I mean, looking at this makes me uncomfortable. I think that that's the point of it sometimes, though. Like, it's otherworldly and it's shocking, and this looks like a horror movie to me. So this is Patricia Putney, and it's called Metaflora, and like, so this is like the detail of what's happening over here. And honestly, like, I don't really know how to describe what's happening. Like, I really don't. Like, some kind of weird alien flesh toned, white flesh tone, like pink, piggy. I don't know. It's strange. So she's an Australian contemporary artist who creates the world that exists somewhere between the one that we all know and the one that is almost upon us. One with a terrifying appearance. Her work is neither imagined as the nightmare future environmental ruin, nor the brave new world of errorless scientific process. Instead, she focuses on the internal, emotional lives of the everyday new creatures that might emerge and begin its life, but also on the questions about the kinds of relationships that might come to light around them. The creatures are unsettling and strange, yet nothing threatening. When the first impression of terror passes, all that remains is their vulnerability, as they plead with us to look beyond their figures and accept them as they are. Like, you know, ultimately, like, her work, I like ended up looking at it for a while because like I couldn't get it. But like, you get it after you start looking at her work, and she has like other stuff, you know, cover names. She has like figures that are like human-esque, but like mixed with other animals and like non-animals, and I don't know, you know. So, and ultimately what she tries to do is kind of get you to humanize them and feel for them and see and empathize. So she's trying to take this feeling of like confrontation and disgust and making you see it in a new light and kind of empathize with what first scares you. So, all right. So is this inappropriate? Art that's confrontational might be inappropriate. So Paul McCarthy. They talked about him in this book, or not they, Ocean. Ward did, it's this guy, hold on. Alright, so, I thought I'd talk about a different one. So, yes, so Paul McCarthy, y'all might have heard about this, in 2014, y'all might have just been too young, but, in 2014, there was like a big inflatable tree at Christmas time-ish in Paris, and then all of a sudden people realized that it's a butt plug, and they got very upset because it's just like there in the middle, but you don't know that's a butt unless you know. Same with this over here. So this is called Santa Claus, and this was in the Netherlands, and it is more affectionately referred to in the Netherlands as the butt plug gnome. So this is, this is Paul McCarthy's work. He does work that shocks you. He does work that's like inappropriate. Like he puts these items that are usually put away, your embarrassing object. It's your assignment for the week if you haven't, one of them, gotten that far. So he puts this item that like is usually like hid away, like in secret in a drawer, where I don't know. And he made it larger than life, literally, and turned it into a symbol for Christmas twice, in a sense. Which is pretty bizarre, and so he's playing on that idea of like the shape of the object being, is it in the shape? Why is it that we associate that shape? So, things to think about. Art is confrontation. I'm not going to answer these questions. Y'all have to come up with your own opinions. So yeah, people were mad, obviously, about both of these things at different points, although I think they're like more mad about the Paris one than the Netherlands one, because the Netherlands are just like, they're cool people. Alright, so types of confrontational art, controversial art, terms to know. Abject art. So abject art is used to describe artworks which explore themes that transgress and threaten our senses of cleanliness and property. Sorry. Abject art is used to describe artworks which explore themes that transgress and threaten our sense of cleanliness and propriety, particularly referencing the body and bodily functions. Yes, so this is by artist Robert Gober, and it is untitled Man Coming Out of Woman. So Robert Gober is an abject artist. He, like, people use a lot of body parts. He happens to use a lot of legs, but it's not just legs that he does use a lot of legs. But yeah, so here is a woman, like, giving birth, but it's like a man's leg. And yeah, it's just like sits in the corner of a gallery, like that. So abject art re-examine the human body after decades of neglect in previous mainstream art movements. This new body was dejected, diseased, filthy, ruined, wounded, and in a word, abject. Abjection as employed in art was a concept borrowed from the French psychoanalyst Julia Kristeva's book, The Powers of Horror. For Kristeva, abjection is the feeling of revulsion and disgust when the boundaries we use to categorize the world, such as inside, outside, animal, human, animate, inanimate, and life and death, are transgressed. So, yes. So Robert Gober takes like these kind of like ordinary, like looking people, and then makes like lifelike looking sculptures, but it like really focuses on like the bodiness of people. So he challenges things familiar to us, such as the concepts of family, religion, sexuality, isolation, and memory. Next. Grotesque. That's probably what I would say if I saw this work in a gallery. That's grotesque. Alright, so what do we have here? So this is Kiki Smith, Tail, 1992. And so grotesque is traditionally the fantastic combination of human and animal forms, now more generally any exaggerated and often comic distortion of figures or designs in bizarre, disgusting, or absurd scenes. So abject and grotesque, like they kind of like cross that like line. They're very similar. This is probably like, you know, typically more gross, and it might also have like non-human forms. So if I was going to say, you know, her artwork is probably more grotesque because it's not necessarily a human form. It's not a human bodily form. It's inhuman. So, yeah. But this, because you know, that's like more grotesque too. So, in my opinion, and like the body is not like necessarily in it like 100% like lifelike like that it usually is in like more of the abject sculptures like over here. So there we go. So okay, so indeed in abject art it's hard to draw clear boundaries between what is of the body and what is outside of it. Tail by Kiki Smith is a life-size sculpture of a woman seeming to crawl on all fours like an animal on the gallery floor. Her haunches are smeared with feces and nearly 10-foot long tail of excrement stretches in a straight line behind her. Is Smith's crawling figure animal or human? Is her excrement a part of the body or exterior to it? So, yeah. Some of the effects of abjection are disgust, repulsion, and disavowal, which, you know, we probably all have here, and that's like very present in Kiki Smith's work. Yeah, I don't know. This one just, yeah, that's gross. So, we're going to talk about, what does it mean, like, how can having a confrontation with an art object versus an art performance kind of have a different impact? So in this book, also, they talk about, what else could we talk about? Cleaning 2009 by Teresa Margolis. So, in this work, it's an installation consisting of repeated performance carried out by 1 to 3 people mopping the floors of an exhibition space with a mixture of water obtained from humidifying fabrics that previously absorbed fluids and leftovers from crime scenes in different cities of northern Mexico. So, essentially what they're doing is like mopping the floor with the blood of people from crime scenes. They like got and like wrung it out into a thing. And similarly, in Papel's Papers, 2003, 92 sheets of Fabriano paper were soaked with water that was used to wash the corpses after an autopsy. So each piece of paper is from a different autopsy bath. And the colors of the different paper could say something a lot about, like, what happened to somebody? Like, why are some more red and some are, like, not? About, like, how someone died. So, here we have that idea of, like, you know, if you were to come up upon these two works and you didn't know, these aren't confrontational because they are inherently, like, they look like they are confrontational. They're confrontational once you realize the background. So, in the tablet background of the work. Because otherwise, you know, if you just walked into a gallery and just saw someone mopping and didn't know what was happening and what they were mopping with, I mean, you know, what do you wouldn't know, you can't think anything if you don't know. You're like, oh, I better not step on this wet spot. But knowing that they're mopping and you're like walking on it, so then you're like involved in the stepping on these deceased people, it puts a lot of ethical things, like, you know, up for question there. And kind of like, how does maybe like an immersion in it, like, versus something that you can just choose to walk away from that. But once you're in the room, if you're in the middle of the room before you realize it, you still have to get out. So, which one is more of a confrontation? Is this one because it is more immediately apparent in the visuality? Or this one because once you're in it, you are brought into this space where you're now like walking on the remains of a victim. Yeah. Victims. So, yeah, it's really interesting. So Teresa Margolis is a visual artist who examines social causes and consequences of death, destruction, and civil war. For Margolis, the morgue accurately reflects society, particularly her home area where death caused by drug-related crime, poverty, political crisis, and government's brutal military response have devastated communities. She has developed a unique, restrained language in order to speak for her silent subjects, the victims discounted as collateral damage, and nameless statistics. I mean, let me read that part again. The victims discounted as collateral damage and nameless statistics. If this does not relate to where we are right now, I don't know what does. You know, 200,000 dead with coronavirus, guys. More than. So, because ultimately, what you know about this, all you know is that this person, but you don't know that, you know, these are people with families and lives, and these are people with families and lives that died because of violence, most likely, and drug abuse, and they just become a number. So, who's looking now? We're gonna talk about the gaze. So the gaze is all about like who's looking at what, like. Yeah. Okay. In Lockean psychoanalytic theory, the gaze is the anxious state of mind that comes with the self-awareness that one can be seen and looked at. The psychological effect upon the person subjected to the gaze is the loss of autonomy upon becoming aware that he or she is a visible object. So the gaze is whenever you know you're being watched, and you know who of the doing watching and stuff like that. Y'all are currently my audience. You know, y'all have the spectator gaze on me, although like it is not like a live thing. So the gaze can be understood as, in psychological terms, to gaze implies more than to look. It signifies a psychological relationship of power in which the gazer is superior to the object of the gaze. So the person with holding the gaze has the power. And this, in the sense of the art, It is the creator of the artwork, because they are subjecting you to their gaze. In the 80s, Laura Mulvey, in her essay The Visual Pleasure of Narrative Cinema, introduced the male gaze as a symptom of power asymmetry, hypothesizing about what she called the male gaze. The defining characteristics of the male gaze is that the audience is forced to regard the action and characters of a text through the perspectives of a heterosexual male. So with the male gaze, it is automatically assumed that you, the viewer, are from the male gaze. So it's about like what the creator was and wants you to do, wants you to put themselves in the position of. So if they're a male, they're probably going to have the male gaze. Especially the heterosexual male, so it's more of a voyeuristic looking, we'll get into that. The camera lingers on the curves of the female body. The event which occurs to a woman are presented largely in context of the man's reaction to these events. The male gaze denies the woman agency, relating them to status of object. The female reader or viewer must experience the narrative secondarily by identification with the male. So, I don't know, pick up a freaking like Sports Illustrated magazine, like the ones with the, do they all have bathing suits on the front? The ones with the bathing suits on the front, that's like the male gaze, you know, like, it's you know, sexualized, it's denying a woman agency. If you really want to get into learning about it, watch Misrepresentation. It's a documentary that's on, I think you can find it on like YouTube, so it's actually a very good documentary. But yeah, so it talks about the male gaze. The female gaze is the female version of that, although the female gaze is typically not as sexualized, and it's only recently that we're like having this talk about the female gaze, because all throughout history it's always been about the male gaze, and I'm not gonna like fully get into that. It's just we're gonna talk about Jeff Koons now. Alright, so this is Jeff Koons, and he is a good example of the male gaze in like the gaze in you know, multiple of his works. He's also very well known for like his balloon dog sculptures. If y'all can that, and he's also just like, I have my own opinions. Anyways, so these are from a series by Jeff Koons called Made in Heaven, and they feature him and his now ex-wife in various states of copulation or foreplay or whatever. And his wife was a porn star, in like a European porn star, and turned politician now, I think. But yeah, so he has like life-size sculptures of them, different ones, and then he has like the billboard and depict his sexual relationship with his wife, the Italian porn star Iona Staller. They're very provocative, blur boundaries between fine art and pornography. And yeah, so these had a lot of controversy around them, because like it was like, oh my god, is that just porn like in the thing? But I don't think like anybody will get into what happens versus like this is the benefit of being heterosexual. So, but you know, that will come later. So yeah, Jeff Koons, he later with his wife, he has the power in this relationship. It's easy to tell, like, you're supposed to be like the male viewer of this. It's not like you're put, as you're looking at these, like, you want to be the guy. He's making eye contact with you. He's gazing at you. Her eyes are closed. That's all like a thing too. You know, he's in the power position in both of these. Also, one of the reasons why they divorced, because she said that she was like afraid of him and his like power and money and lawyers. So I was like, interesting. Yeah. Move on. All right. So voyeurism and desire. So voyeurism is very similar to the gaze. It is within the same umbrella of the gaze. So voyeurism is defined as a practice in which an individual derives sexual pleasure in observing unsuspecting people while they undress, are naked, or engage in sexual activities. The interest is usually a mere act of watching rather than a person being watched. So they like to watch people. They are voyeurs. The key element of voyeurism is that a person being watched doesn't know that they are being observed. The person is typically in a place where they have a reasonable expectation of privacy, such as their home or other private area. The word derives from the French word voir, to see, with the er suffix that translates as er in English. The literal translation could be seer or observer with a pejorative connotation. Also, the word voyeur can define someone who receives enjoyment from witnessing other people's suffering or misfortune. So it's people that like to watch people. Most of the time it's in acts of sexuality and desire, and in private. So here we have a few works by Mary Alpin, and these are from the Dirty Windows series. So Mary Alpin is a contemporary American photographer famous for her controversial oeuvre and utilization of surveillance photography. So these are from 1999, and these are comprised of a voyeuristic black and white image secretly taken through a bathroom window of a low-rent sex club near Wall Street. Using a telephone lens, she captured men and women engaging in sex, doing drugs, and dressing or undressing in a host of other activities. Although this series sparked many controversies and made public uneasy, it catapulted the photographer's career. While staying at a friend's loft in the Wall Street district in 1992, Mary Alpin realized that the window in the back room provides a view of the bathroom window at an illegal lap dance club where stockbrokers and other well-to-do businessmen handed over hundreds of dollars in drugs to women in G-strings and black lace. Captivated by the spectacle, the artist spent the entire winter hidden in a friend's loft, spying with her camera, engaging in the sociological espionage the artist used to fast black and white film to create, imbued it in a peak show quality. After submitting the series to the National Endowments for the Arts, Alpin's work was rejected and vilified by conservatives, along with the co-candidates for Andrea Serrano and Barbara de Genevieve. So she was, at the same time, this was within the same kind of controversy that Andrea Serrano received, and it's always the conservatives that are mad about stuff. But yeah, she was watching people get busy. So, art exploitation for the sake of art. So this was talked about both in your book and the podcast. So in both of these, this was one from the book, 160 millimeter line, and they were paid with heroin. And then in this other one, they were paid in, I think they're just paid in regular money in Cuba, because there's not a lot of work down there and stuff in the 90s. This was in 1991. So Sierra says that the tattoo is not the problem. The problem is the existence of the social conditions that allow me to make this work. By presenting this to an elite audience, a documentation of what happened, he in a way takes over control over his actions, albeit not in a good way. If he were to carry out the transaction and proceed with the art right before a live audience, would there be found one person to stop it? This is his depiction of the power that political class has amassed for themselves. In the same way, they will hide their actions from the public and only come out when they have already made personal gain from a situation. Sierra definitely opens our eyes to the exploitation that exists in the world today. So, he exploits people for the sake of art, which, as if you hear the podcast, you know, the podcasters obviously find it utterly objectable or something like that. So, and I get it. It is. Could I imagine myself doing it? No. I won't even tattoo myself. I don't like needles. But he does kind of throw this back at you. Like, if you're, you know, what would happen in public versus private, and, you know, the connotations behind, like, the systems of power structures. And, of course, you don't want to see people exploited like this. But, I mean, people are exploited every day. Like, maybe they're not exploited to put a tattoo on their back, but they're exploited for a ton of other reasons. So, like, where do we draw the line? You know? Like, people are exploited for labor all the time, all over the world. So, think about it. Alright, so, NSFW, question mark. So, this is Robert Mapplethorpe. And over here we have, this is called Joe NYC. This is Patti Smith. And then this is the self-portrait with a whip. Robert Mapplethorpe was a homosexual, like, although maybe bi, but I'm pretty sure homosexual, like, maybe just, like, in his early life he, like, wasn't sure. But I haven't read, like, his whole book. I mean, he used to be, or, like, whole life story, you know, whatever. He did date Patti Smith for a long time. But then, like, his later life was, like, more explored through, male desires. So, you know, whatever. Still on life. Anyway, so Robert Mapplethorpe was, a music poet and artist, and him and Patti Smith lived together in New York, where he started shooting Polaroid collages. So Patti Smith was, like, his girlfriend, and yeah, he, like, specifically does a lot of nudes and a lot of, like, kind of taboo sexualized subjects, but especially a lot of, like, kind of, she shows, like, the underworld of, like, subcultures in the gay community and, like, BDSM and stuff like that, and people didn't like it. Like, I mean, clearly some people did, but people got mad. So they wanted to censor it. So Robert Mapplethorpe died of AIDS in the 90s. And maybe it was the 80s, actually. Well, shortly after his death, there was a retrospective of his artwork at the Cincinnati Museum of Art, and it was called The Perfect Moment, and it featured a lot of these works and many more, including one where there was, like, a guy peeing in a guy's mouth. There's a lot of, like, very, like, just, like, penises and stuff like that. And he, if anybody's drawing, like, questioning the bounds between, like, art and pornography and, like, photography, pornography, like, it's definitely Robert Mapplethorpe, but let's be real. The reason that people got mad was not because it's pornographic only. Because, like, yes, people got mad at Jeff Koons, but he never got, like, rioted. People didn't, like, want to take it down. Like, they didn't protest. There wasn't a lawsuit, as far as I know. But there's a lawsuit here. So about 30 years ago, probably now, the art was put on, highly publicized and put on a political showdown. It was called the Mapplethorpe Obscenity Trial. The first time a museum was taken to court on criminal charges related to works on display. Became one of the most heated battlefronts in the era's cultural wars. Taking place over 2 weeks in the fall of 1990, the resulting attention challenged perceptions of art, public funding, and what constituted as obscenity. A quarter century on, the trial's impact can still be felt and being recognized in Cincinnati, the city where it all took place, with a series of events and exhibits. At issue was the perfect moment, a retrospective exhibit of the photographer Robert Mapplethorpe. He had risen to national prominence through his black and white depictions of 1970s New York, including celebrities Andy Warhol, Philip Glass, Deborah Harry, nudes, and graphic depictions of sadomasochism. Robert sought to elevate aspects of male experience to imbue homosexuality with mysticism. As his longtime roommate and occasional collaborator Patti Smith said of his work in her memoir of their relationship, Just Kids, the show's approximately 175 images captured the range of Mapplethorpe's subjects over his 25-year career, grouping them into 3 portfolios: nude portraits of African American men, the flower still lives, and homosexual S&M. So, it obviously wasn't the flower still lives that people were up in their arms about. I mean, although it definitely does call back to George O'Keeffe, but it's the sexuality, and it's not just the sexuality, it's the homosexuality, because if we go back to the ethics, it's people don't believe that homosexuality is ethically right because their religion says that, or, whatever. Their morals, their internal morals tell them that. So, it's not that there are depictions of pornography, it is about the homophobia of it. Ultimately, though, what was declared was that art won. And it was seen as art, and it wasn't meant to be a pornographic depictions. So yeah, they already had what's it called whenever you tell people that hey, don't come in here if you're underage, kind of thing. So it's whatever. This one is my favorite though, because welcome to Cincinnati. I thought that was clever. Alright, so does intellectual property even exist anymore? So we go from censoring art, it didn't really work, but that's not to say that art doesn't still get censored. It gets censored all the time, I'm sure. Especially in countries that are not America. But, okay, so if you aren't sure what intellectual property is, it's up here at the top. Intellectual property refers to creations of the mind, such as inventions, literary and artistic works, designs and symbols, names and images used in commerce. So, it's anything that you make, anything that you write, like your Instagram images, whatever. It is technically your intellectual property if you were the one that created it and took the picture and wrote your caption and my dissertation is my intellectual property. That's why you can't plagiarize. That's someone else's intellectual property. You have to cite. So, Richard Prince, master appropriator, master sexist dickhead. So this is an exhibition by Richard Prince called Nude Portraits at Gagosian, and Richard Prince always appropriates, but now he's literally screenshot pictures of all women on Instagram, and then include them, and then put it large and put them in the museum, and he's going to sell them, and he didn't ask them for their permission, didn't get permission. Some of them are nude and or half dressed, and yeah, he he's using their image without their permission and their reproduction and stuff like that. So currently it's in a legal battle. So we'll see where it goes. But I don't know. He has many times been put in legal battles for plagiarism or, you know, intellectual property and things like that. So he always tries to say that he like will change things slightly, but with this one in particular, and I left a bunch of links, he did not change anything, so that's why he's in that legal battle. So we'll see, because, you know, like, who's to say, like, I mean, I agree with the women, but, because that's just, that guy, it sucks. He clearly is in the power position, he's just, like, taking their intellectual property. But it's like, who's to say, like, I don't know, with digital culture and moving so quickly, it's so hard to reference things. Good luck, guys. But yeah. So sometimes with confrontational art, you don't want to rush to judgment, which is what happened over here, by a lot of people. So this is, from an exhibition called Night of Despair, Warrior of Beauty. These are two different pictures if you can't see that. So it's an installation in the Hermitage in Russia from 2017 by artist Jan Fabry. Dutch? Fabry? I don't really know. But, so, the artwork in here, the artist mixed the classical paintings from the Hermitage's collection with stuffed dead animals. And, like, real animals, like dogs and cats and birds and squirrels and rabbits. And he kind of paired it with, like, images from paintings, like classical paintings that has, like, these same kind of creatures in them, animals in them. So, an exhibition featuring installation by the Belgian artist and theater director Jan Fabry in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg has provoked an outcry from both human rights activists and art lovers. The exhibition, entitled Jan Fabry Night of Despair, Warrior of Beauty, featured effigies of dead animals in installations with names such as Carnival of Dead Mongrels and Protest of Dead Homeless Cats. An effigy made from animals hanging on hooks is really a protest against the consumerist relationship of humans towards animals, Fabry said, explaining the installation at the opening of the exhibit. According to Fabry, the dead dog is predominantly a metaphor, a self-portrait of the artist, because the artist is a wandering dog. At the opening, the artist also reminded viewers that the animals used in the exhibition have been found dead on the streets. So this is obviously made a lot of animal rights people mad, because, like, there are dead animals, like, hanging all over, and people get mad about that. Especially if it's, like, pet animals, and not, like, hunting or meat animals. So, the point here with Jan Fabry was that he made this art with animals that were already dead in the first place, and then he just stuffed them, and he was, like, trying to play on the idea of, like, consumer culture and, like, you know, also with, like, pets, because we're, like, always buying new pets and puppy farms and overbreeding, and a lot of these, like, European countries and in Russia, like, there are so many just, like, stray dogs and cats, like, running everywhere, and, like, becomes an issue. So, and then they just get pulled in the streets from cars, or, like, by other animals. So, that's what he's playing on. But whenever this opened, what happened is that there was a large outcry, obviously. And people called for the exhibition to close, because, like, the Hermitage, and what does it represent, and this and that, because of the dead animals. But at the time, a lot of the people that were making the comments and calling for it to close hadn't been to the exhibit, they hear those keywords like dead dog, dead cat, stuffed animals, and hanging from the gallery ceiling, and they're horrified. But you know, they rush to judgment based on not actually viewing the work and seeing the work and like becoming immersed in understanding the work. Would I necessarily want to see it in person? No, because like I don't need to see like a dead stuffed dog. Like, it's not my thing. But you know, like, it does really bring to light those ideas of like, you know, cherishing these pets and like man's best friend, but yet they're homeless. And yeah. So let's talk. Last slide. So how do we address our offensive past? Sometimes it's not as hard, not as easy as you want it to be. I thought that this would obviously, if I'm going to talk about offensive art, I have to talk about Confederate statues because those are being pushed down left and right all summer. So, Kehinde Wiley, who I've talked about before a lot, has has a different take on what we should do with these kind of sculptures. So over here, this is a Kehinde Wiley sculpture called Rumors of War, and it is modeled after this, whatever this one is, I forgot. It's the one that's already in Virginia. Confederate Army General James A.U.L. Brown. Okay, so this was a Confederate statue in Richmond. And the Richmond Museum commissioned Kehinde Wiley to create this. And on top of this horse, so Kehinde Wiley, he creates those paintings, and he often has like replaces black men in the place of like Renaissance people and different stuff like that, Renaissance white men. And he has done the same thing here, except so we have like the horse and everything. Except up here we have this black man in like everyday clothes. He's in a hoodie. It's very important. Trayvon Martin like got killed because he was in a hoodie because he looked threatening. And like dreads. So very like much a classic, like obvious African American figure. With Rumors of War, he expands his concept while directly engaging with the national conversation around monuments and their role in perpetuating incomplete histories and inequality. As a direct response to the Confederate statues that line the Monument Avenue in Richmond, Wiley conceived the idea for Rumors of War when he visited the city in 2016 for the opening of Kehinde Wiley, A New Republic, at the VMFA. Rumors of War takes its inspiration from the statue of the Confederate Army General Jeb, sitting upon his muscular horse. However, in Wiley's sculpture, the figure is a young African-American man dressed in urban streetwear. And yeah. Yeah, so he kind of, like he does in his paintings, he plays on that idea. He rewrites that narrative. So what Kehinde Wiley has said in an interview is, it's not that we just need to necessarily destroy our past, but how can we reframe it? Can we put them in a place and like bring context to the creation of these monuments? Because it's like, what are we celebrating with these monuments? Is it our history? No. Why are we celebrating somebody that lost, for one thing? For two, most of those freaking monuments were built like during the Civil Rights era to scare black people, because it was like, this is a white tomb, we're putting a Confederate monument. So, once you think about those connotations, and you try to tell me that this is from heritage, and you want your little Participation trophy, no. So, what do we do with the offensive monuments? You know, it's going to have to be up to each city to decide, but we got to have context. We got to have context. They shouldn't be the center of our city. Some stuff is too offensive. Some stuff doesn't just need to be. It's not that it's censored. It needs to adjust with time. Alright, y'all think what y'all want. Do the stuff. Talk to y'all later.